I'm going to show you how to install a stereo in your car. I'm working on a 99 Toyota Tacoma, but these principles will work for any vehicle. First step is locate. It's free, which I've never used VCR. See how the shirt performs? Bam. Tray clicks out. Everything is optional. Well, it varies. Your engine. So we need to take off these knobs off the dials and the switches. I'm making sure to be careful as I do all this. Here's the equipment, tools, and materials you'll need to install a new stereo. I'm using a flathead screwdriver to remove the AC switch. It's a special switch because it has a light in it. Now I'm using my hands and the flathead screwdriver to take off this faceplate, and make sure to be careful because this thing is pretty thin and it could break if you yank on it too hard. Taking out the cigarette tray and removing the face of my old stereo. This one didn't have Bluetooth. These are the 3 screws you'll need to remove in order to take off this piece of the vehicle. I'm using a Phillips screwdriver and pliers to take out these screws and to make sure I don't lose them. Now I'm using the flathead screwdriver to pry on this piece, and I'm being careful and switching to different parts as I remove it. This is the last screw on the bottom right. Once I've taken that off, I can pull this off, but be careful because things are still connected. As you can see, this is stuff such as the passenger airbag and the cigarette lighter power things. Making sure to get the cables out of the way. Here's some more cables. Those are pretty cool, huh? Okay, now I am removing the 4 screws that hold in the stereo unit. And again, I'm using pliers to make sure I don't lose the screws. And I am using Fate to make sure that the screws drop anyways. This is the antenna wire. And this is the stereo wire harness. Here's how this works. Your car has a wire harness that comes out of it. Your stereo has another. You need an adapter to be able to connect the two. Here's my old wire harness. As you can see, I've done this before. This is one of my good luck charms. We're going to save that for later. I'm going to remove this bracket piece with a Phillips screwdriver. It allows a singled-in stereo, which is what I had and what I'm installing, to fit in this whole cavity. A singled-in stereo is 2 inches tall and a doubled-in is 4 inches tall. This spacer allows it to fill the entire cavity available for a stereo. Pretty cool, huh? Just a little dusty. RIP my old stereo. I already sold that. You're welcome for not making a video about it. Here I am with my new stereo and my new wire harnesses. I am holding the wire harness that comes out of the stereo and looking up the Pioneer wire harness diagram, which is how I will match the Pioneer wire harness. With this one, I don't need that. Those are for back speakers, and I have a small cab, so I don't have rear speakers. And now I am taking the caps off of this wire harness. Here I am comparing the 2 different wire harness diagrams so that I can match them up correctly. The idea is you match color to color for the most part. This is very straightforward, but just to make sure I'm writing them all out to make sure I can match them all up properly. I am matching the wire harness that I got off Amazon with the wire harness for the Pioneer stereo. Here I am soldering the cables together. As you can see, I'm matching like to like, and then I am covering the solder with heat shrink tubing. I made a big mistake by getting way too small of shrink tubing, and so if you get heat shrink tubing for your project, I'd make sure to get bigger diameter heat shrink tubing. The one I got was really small, and so I forgot that once you solder something, the cables are bigger because there's a solder in the middle, and so it was really hard for me to slide the heat shrink tubing over the solder. This is the best process I found for soldering, and it involved melting the solder onto the solder gun and then painting it on to the end of the wires and then soldering those together. Here you can see I'm sliding the heat shrink tubing over, but again, because mine is so small, this was pretty difficult. Heat shrink tubing simply shrinks with heat, so I am using the same gun to shrink it, but I'm not using the very end because that would just impart some of the solder onto the heat shrink tubing. But if you get a little on, it doesn't really matter. I just wasn't doing it for cosmetic reasons. And I am installing little caps at the end of these wires. This is off the Pioneer wire harness, and again, since I don't have rear speakers in my cab, I don't need those to connect to anything. Here I'm using zip ties to tie all the wires together just to have it be a little bit more clean and organized back there. There it is. I got my adapter and my Pioneer wire harness connected. And again, because my heat shrink tubing was so small, I'm wrapping each cable with a little bit extra of electrical tape. Here I am back in Mika, connecting my wire harness to the car's wire harness and just admiring how good of a job I did. Here's the antenna cable again. I'm connecting it to my new stereo. This smaller wire harness coming out of the car is what would connect to rear speakers. I'm putting the spacer back on. It's a standard size, so it fit this stereo as well. Double checking my screws and putting my new stereo back in and lining it up with the holes. When I'm doing this, I am screwing one screw in and then alternating, making sure, like installing a tire, that I am cross tightening so that it doesn't install unevenly. And I am hooking up all the cigarette lighters and everything that had cables, which is a little awkward, but patience did the trick. Now it's back on, simply pushing it all back in. Nice. Now I'm putting the 3 screws that hold this in, and this thing I kind of messed up. RIP this thing, it never worked again the same, but I'm not really a smoker, so I don't know what I would put in there anyways. Also RIP Apple Watch, unrelated. And I'm putting this plate back on. It just snaps right back in. And the AC switch I am putting back in. And now all the little knobs for the dials and the levers. Now I'm putting the cigarette lighter thing back in, and good luck charm back where it belongs. I turn on my car. There it is. Works just like a charm, not to be confused with the charm from earlier. And just to prove it to you, yeah, I removed it for copyright reasons, but just imagine it playing, right? Guys, thanks for watching. I like making videos about cars, I guess, and comedy, and yeah, just thanks for watching. I hope you're able to install your new stereo and get jamming out to your music. See you next time.